Executive Director of Right on Crime, former federal prosecutor and former U.S. attorney for Utah, Brett Tolman. Let's start with this, Brett, if we might. Just give me a little bit of understanding. Not everyone in our country, not every citizen versus every non-citizen has the same level of due process. It's not one size fits all. It isn't given out of a Cracker Jack box. It's tailored to your situation, is it not, in this country?
Yeah, Will, I love what you said before and the highlights that you raised, because it shows that the Democrats are using the Constitution as a punchline without understanding. They don't understand what our federal laws actually are. Let me just state so it's simple for everyone to understand. Due process depends, the rights that we have under due process, under the Constitution, the 4th, 5th, 6th, 14th Amendments of the Constitution apply differently depending on who you are and where you're at. And what I mean by that, if you're an individual who is an illegal that crosses the border, your due process rights are at their lowest at the border. So they can grab you, they can take you back immediately, they do not have to put you into the United States, and setting foot on the United States does not grant you immediate rights. In order to do that, they would have to come into the country, and then they would have to establish one other factor, and that would be that they would have to show that they have substantially done something to show that they have developed permanency or the intention to live here permanently in this country. And then, and only then, will they increase those due process rights. However, there are exceptions. If they're designated a terrorist, or if they do have deportation orders, they get a lower showing of due process applied. In the case of a terrorist, virtually none. In the case of a deportation order, they get a fair trial, and it's a civil trial, not a criminal trial, and then they can be deported.
All right, I want to walk through that if we can really quickly so I can make that absolutely clear to everyone watching, that they can't just treat due process, as you point out, as a punching bag or as a punch line or as a piece of political propaganda. If you enter this country illegally and are caught at the border, you are afforded basically zero rights to due process. On the other end of that spectrum, if you're an American citizen, you have the full spectrum of due process, which grants you the government needing to establish a certain burden of proof and the right to appear before a court and make your case. Somewhere in between are the due process rights of permanent residents and or people who are illegally in this country but are found in the interior of the country, but still something short of the full due process rights of an American citizen. The question then, if I understand you correctly, Brett, is has that been applied to Abrego Garcia and to, for example, Mahmoud Khalil, both of whom have different levels, Mahmoud Khalil being a permanent resident, Abrego Garcia being an illegal alien. They have gotten some measure of due process, if I understand this correctly. They have both been seen by judges. In Mahmoud Khalil's case, he is in a civil situation where his situation is determined not by a judge, but by the Secretary of State. Do these, in your estimation, amount to, for their situation and their individuality, due process?
Yes, in fact, well stated. And I would say that in the one instance, Abrego Garcia, you have been afforded due process that you're entitled to, the protections that you're entitled to. You have had a hearing. In that hearing, it is by clear and convincing evidence that they must show that you're there illegally in the country. And if they show that, so that's not beyond a reasonable doubt, that is clear and convincing evidence. If they show that, then a deportation order can be issued, which was issued in that case, and they can be deported. That's all the rights that they're afforded. That's all the rights they are entitled to under the Constitution and protected with. In the case of Khalil, you have, in the instance of a permanent residence, you're not entitled to and you're not guaranteed to have residency here permanently in this country if you do certain things. And those determinations are made by those who granted you the status in the first place. It's not an entitlement to citizenship. And there's a distinction between what citizens have and what those who are not yet citizens in this country are afforded. So in his case, there was a designation that what he was doing violated the terms and conditions of granting him that status in the country, and they revoked it. That's well within the executive branch's right.
All right. Former federal prosecutor Brett Tolman on helping us understand due process, not just treat it as political propaganda. Thank you, Brett.
Thanks, Will.